We're back with the former #2 at the CIA turned CBS News senior security contributor, Michael Morell, and former Homeland Security Adviser to George W. Bush, Fran Townsend. Fran, I want to start with you. What are the Homeland Security implications of these attacks?
Well, look, we understand that finding someone, a homegrown, self-radicalized individual in this country is very, very difficult. Especially, Director Comey on Friday said that this individual had minimal contacts. He didn't say what that meant. Minimal contacts with known counterterrorism investigations, but that will be very important to understand for the FBI. Were those direct contacts, such as phone calls, or was that sort of indirect, like social media following, or they were followed by other individuals who were extremists? And so this is going to become very important. We know it's hard to identify these people, so anything we can learn about these individuals and what contacts they had will be very important to understanding in the future how to identify these people.
Does minimal contacts mean perhaps, though, just that they followed them on Facebook? And if that's the case, then that seems like the pool is huge of people that could have those minimal kinds of contacts.
That's right. And so typically for the FBI, those sort of minimal contacts didn't sort of cross a threshold for preliminary investigations. The question is now, if that's all you've got, to go on, do they need to reevaluate their domestic investigation operational guidelines to permit them to make a judgment that in some cases that may be enough?
Mike, what do you think about these attacks? What do they tell you?
So just stepping back a little bit, right? A couple things. One is ISIS is on a roll here. In the last 5 weeks, to put it in baseball terms, they've hit for the cycle. They have a major attack that they conceived and directed from Raqqa, that's Paris. They've had an attack that one of their affiliates has done, that's the Russian airliner in the Sinai, and they've had an inspired attack here in the homeland, that's San Bernardino, right? Second is, while those 3 attacks have our attention, it's the tip of the iceberg in terms of what they're doing across Africa and in the Middle East. So 25 attacks in the last 5 weeks, killing 250 people. And then the last point I'd make, John, is that in order to deal with this, you have to have a home game, playing defense, which that's what Fran was talking about, and you have to have an away game, right? Taking the fight to them on offense in Iraq and Syria.
That momentum that you describe, talk about the relationship between that and inspiring these kinds of attacks, because there is a link, right?
Absolutely, there's a link. The perception that ISIS is winning, the perception that ISIS is doing well, creates more followers.
Fran, let me talk to you about possible ways to stop this. The president will talk to the nation tonight, and he will talk about gun control again. The argument is that terrorists will use what the president sees as lax gun control in America to gain weaponry. What do you think about that from a purely Homeland Security standpoint?
Well, to be fair, John, in Western Europe, that have the most strictest gun laws, we saw what happened in the Paris attacks with the use of lots of weaponry. So here in the United States, we know that in 2011, Adam Gadon, who was very close to bin Laden, issued a videotape calling for followers, those who might be inspired, to take advantage of the West gun laws, specifically here in the United States, to obtain weapons. I think over time we're going to have to look at this. Do civilians really need to have assault weapons? And all the sort of related issues. We've heard a lot about, should we tie it to the terror watch list? There was legislation that didn't pass the Senate this week. There is an argument to be made that people on the terror watch list should obviously not be able to get guns. The problem with that is the terror watch lists are hugely expansive. Hundreds of thousands of Americans mistakenly put on it. And so I think if you want to rely on that, you're going to have to clean up the terror watch lists.
Mike, that's the home game. Let's talk about the away game. The administration has picked up their efforts. What do you make of the new efforts to fight ISIS overseas?
So I think the most significant thing we've seen so far is the creation of a task force, a special operations task force that will be stationed in Iraq to go after the leadership of ISIS. I think that's very important. It can become self-sustaining. You need a little bit of intelligence to start, but then once you start capturing these guys, you'll generate additional intelligence that allows you to go back and get more of them. I think that's a very important intensification, amplification. I think we need to see more, however.
What do you make quickly of the London attacks, this knife attack in London?
Same thing. It's undoubtedly inspired by ISIS. It was one of the attacks that I referenced earlier in this broader array of attacks that ISIS is either directing or inspiring.
Fran, finally to you. Donald Trump mentioned this question of profiling. What do you think of that?
You know, there is always some role for, we build profiles based on what your experience is, what you know about past bad guys, right? But it's self-limiting. So it's a tool. It's one of the tools you use, but you have to have ongoing and current intelligence to direct your efforts. And by the way, the minute the bad guys get a sense that you have a profile, they work around it.
All right, Fran. Mike, thanks very much.